said, I'm Dave Eisenberg. I'm the assistant editor of Brewbound. And with this panel, I guess if Mark's still getting all set up, all right, we good? So we're going to go over some of the intricacies of the wholesale market here. As Michael kind of delicately put it earlier, it's not saturated, it's mature. So we're going to kind of explore that a little bit through the lens of from a brewer's perspective as well as from a wholesale perspective. And as Chris said, these guys kind of don't need to be introduced, but I'll sort of let them introduce themselves anyway because they can describe themselves better than I can. I guess we'll start and just go down the line. We'll start with you, Brett.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Brett Joyce. I have the amazing privilege of running Rogue Ales, a small craft brewery out of Newport, Oregon, founded in 1988. It's an amazing place. We have 2 farms, 11 pubs, a distillery, 300 employees. I got a great wife, 2 kids, and a dog named Rascal. Yeah.
I'm Rob Maletis with Maletis Beverage. I'm the owner and president. We basically represent a lot of great supplier partners in 15 counties, Southwest Washington, Portland, Salem, east to the Cascade Range, west to the Mountain Range, and we are celebrating our 80th anniversary this year at 3rd generation, and I have my son here, 4th generation. Robbie's in the crowd. And Peter is tuned in from Brooklyn, New York. He works the streets on premise, Brooklyn.
Mark?
Wow, that's tough to follow. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Whelan with Columbia Distributing. Thank you for having us all here. It's really a pleasure to be around those of us who love the beer business as much as we all do. I'm here representing our 3,000 employees in Oregon and Washington, and just delighted to have these colleagues alongside us, as well as all of you in the audience to join us here today.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being here. We appreciate it. I guess just to start, we'll start with you guys before we bounce back to you, Brett. But I'm interested in getting sort of your thoughts from a wholesaler's perspective to just sort of kick this off. What are some of the challenges with selling craft brands in a market as mature or saturated as Oregon and Portland is specifically? The specific challenges that you guys are facing.
I'll take it. I don't think it's saturated yet, and I think you have to have that kind of a perspective on the business. It is, as a lot of people know, and they've read in the industry publications, it has hit 50 share of the dollars, which is significant. It's grown at about 2.5 share a year, and it continues to progress at a rate that is very strong on a very large base. So we haven't taken the approach to think that we have saturated the market or it's basically coming to, we're topping out. We think there's a lot of runway ahead of us.
Mark?
I would agree with Rob. I don't think there's really any challenge selling craft beer in Oregon. In fact, really that's not the issue at all. There's an enormous appetite for craft beer. We're making some of the best craft beers in the world, and I think the challenge is balancing the interests of so many talented brewers and making sure that we have a plan to build a business with a lot of complexity in the market today.
So they kind of say there's no challenges, Brett. From the brewer's standpoint, do you agree with that assessment, or are there some challenges that you see?
Oh yeah, there's no question that it's more complicated now than ever before. Just as Carmen said earlier in her overview, that there's 3,500 going to 4,000 craft breweries in the country, and a lot of those breweries are here, or coming here, or want to be here, or will be here in the next 6, 12, 24 months. So there's no doubt that the good old days, the dump and run, pull the truck up to Mount Hood on Yeon and send give the load to Spec, and Spec would sell it. Like those good old days are gone. It wasn't quite that simple, but it was almost that simple if you're talking about 10, 15 years ago. So certainly you have to be, I think, so much more organized, and you have to understand your business, you have to understand the distributor's business, you have to understand the market. So I just think that the price of poker is so much higher now than it was even 5 years ago, let alone if you're talking 10, 15 years ago.
And how have your distributor partners sort of reacted to that and evolved with those challenges?
Yeah, we work with Columbia, and what we've learned through the last, we worked with Mount Hood for a long time, and Columbia post merger is we've had to get a lot better. We've had to learn a lot more about their business because their business is so much more complex just because of the raw number of suppliers that they have to deal with, and then those suppliers all have a lot more SKUs than they once had. So, I mean, I wish there was a silver bullet that I could give you, and actually if there was, I wouldn't give it to you. It'd be up here. But, I mean, it's like there's no, the secret is only hard work, know the business, analyze the business, establish great relationship with your wholesalers, and then you have a chance. Because if you don't do those things, to me, you have no chance.
So Mark, you mentioned sort of balancing the interests. Can you expound on that? How is that something that you do when it's such a mature market? Let's stay away from saturated, I guess, but it's a well-established market, comparatively speaking, to the rest of the states out there. So how do you balance these interests with the brands that you sell and the brands that maybe are interested in coming to this market?
Well, it's difficult because we have so many talented breweries and brewers. We can't swipe right too often. I really appreciated that analogy earlier. There's only so much bandwidth we have, and I think each brewer. It was great hearing Michael speak about Commons, about his brand proposition and the way his vision is coming alive with that brewery. And I think every distributor has to understand their portfolio has to be clear about what the unique brand propositions are. I think, like any good relationship, open communication, honest communication, smart goals, Drucker's SMART goals are really important. So you have reasonable, attainable goals that help you manage your business. I think all these things create an environment for success, and that's what we try and do. We try and be very deliberate. We have a very specific and deliberate onboarding process. We talk to a lot of people. We truly do, sort of measure twice, cut once, to use that cliche, because we want to make sure that that our partners are happy, that our partners have a well-managed expectation. They know what our capabilities are, and the communication is clear. And the last thing is we want to deal with terrific people. And unfortunately, the beer business has an abundance of really terrific people, but we want to deal with people who share common goals, common values, and common vision.
So what's sort of your role in managing the expectations? I imagine it's not unpredictable that a brewery might see this market and see a lot of opportunity, just given how mature it is. So how do you go about tempering those expectations and saying, like, well, this is there's run room here, but at the same time, there's limited shelf space, there's limited tap handles. How do you guys as wholesalers, I guess we can start with Rob this time, how do you temper those expectations and sort of bring in bring them to a realistic vantage point?
Well, I think from the beginning, if we are having discussions with a prospective supplier, and there's a lot of great ones in this room that have done a fantastic job, I do want to use the opportunity to say that in Portland, part of what goes around to accomplishing some of these goals to continue to grow is the simple fact that, here's a market in which Nike's headquartered, Adidas USA, Columbia Sportswear, Keen Footwear, it goes on, and some of the best talent, truly the best talent in that particular industry from an R&D standpoint, from a marketing, this is a hotbed. And I think the craft beer business is very much the same way. So when we talk about some of the opportunities, I think right now a lot of people in the room and a lot of the colleagues that are in the Pacific Northwest are doing some things that are being noticed across the country. So there's a lot of run room, I think, in the Northwest, as well as a lot of run room for some of the very best of those folks in other parts of the country. The Northwest is kind of an appellation. It's kind of the Napa of, craft beer. And I think we're continuing to keep that bar very high. And I think that's directly a part of what a lot of people in this room are doing.
So has the competitive dynamic changed at all as the industry has evolved between wholesalers in the state?
Well, I think it has, certainly because everybody wants to have the supplier that has the kind of passion and has all the ingredients that we all talked about before. That's their primary, focus. It's not a sideline business. It is what they're passionate about, and I think that it's probably safe to say that every distributor out there wants to have that type of supplier that's totally committed to the business in their house.
Right. Brett, you seem to kind of react to that. Have you noticed any changes in that, the competitive dynamic?
Well, no, I mean we all know who the players are. So it's one of these industries where it's kind of like this, like the long tail was solved in lots of consumer product categories by digital solutions. So books was solved by Amazon, and music by iTunes, and in beer you have the long tail in spades. You have all these great breweries, all these great SKUs and products that they want to share, that consumers want. Yet there's only a finite amount of distributors to run those products through. There's no digital solution to beer, so I think it's a unique situation that beer is in, where you can't solve that demand from consumers, from retailers for the long tail on a computer. So it ends up running through a small number, and here in Portland and Oregon we only have a finite number of 3, 4, 5 maybe wholesalers that all these great products have to go through. So I think that's a very unique challenge to the beer space.
Are there any differences you can point to between, distributing, or getting your beer out to market in your home state here versus onto shelves and onto draft lines outside of Oregon?
Yeah, I mean certainly we have the
This is a great chance to say we're much better at it, by the way.
That's right. Columbia's the best. I mean, certainly we have the experience of being in 50 states for a long time. So we have the brand. We have 27 years of being in Oregon. So we have kind of unfair advantages here in Oregon compared to, if you say, in New York, where Rob's son actually works for our distributor in New York City. So we're a lot further from home when you get out to the markets a long ways from Oregon. So here we just have a lot. The brand is so much stronger, has so much history. So yeah, certainly we do a lot better in Oregon, Washington, the Northwest than we do in the rest of the country. So the work in the other markets is a lot different. You have to work harder to get that next shelf placement or get that next tap handle, because you're up against all these great local brewers.
So the Rogue portfolio too, it's less predicated on one stalwart flagship brand. It's sort of, you're known for doing a lot of different things. I guess it might be centered on Dead Guy if we were to point to one, but it's kind of non-flagship specific. Is that something that plays particularly well here? And I'd be interested in learning from you guys too. How do you guys communicate to your supplier partners, that maybe we want a flagship or we want to work on building your whole portfolio? And what's, I guess, the better play in a market like Portland?
Yeah, for us, I mean, we've done variety since day one. So we did variety when there was no variety. And there's probably some people in the room that weren't around when Rogue was founded in 1988. So it's hard for the young people, and we hire lots of young people, so I have to tell them, hey, there was a day when there was no variety and there was no single serve beer business. And they're like, what, there was? I'm like, no, really, there was this dark age. And so we've done variety for a long time. That's one of our core brand tenets, is to do variety. And we thought early on, again, when craft wasn't even a thing yet, we always thought that what the consumer wants and what the retailer wanted was variety. So we always made sure that was an important part of our brand. And I think fast forwarding to today, we're glad that we did, because there is the demand for variety. I mean, who wants to have the same beer all the time? So all that being said, now there's tons of variety from lots of brewers. When we started, there was less than 50 craft breweries in the country. So you kind of think back to then, as compared to now, the market's a lot different. And I think what's critical now, like back then, you could do a beer and it probably would make it to be fine in 89 or 95. Now you better have as a brewer, you better have a really good reason to have that product, because there's so much great beer out there. It's just another product. The world doesn't need that. So I think, as the way we think about it at Rogue is, hey, before we come out with yet another product, we better make sure it's got a great story and got a great concept and got a great package. And obviously the product has to be amazing. So the pressure on the concept, I think, is so much greater now than it used to be.
So where you guys stand with rotating tap handles, how do you guys go about building not just a singular brand, of one of your supplier partners, but building the whole portfolio and making sure each brand in there sort of gets adequate play out in the market. How do you guys go about doing that?
Well, I'll take it. One of the things that I think is real vital is that when a particular supplier that we might enter into a partnership with, if they've done some self-distribution, they realize the power of the retail environment. And as much as we try to build the brand, all right, and that's really key. In the wine business, you could go talk to people now and even years before, and what kind of wine do you want? And they're going to tell you that I like Chardonnay, I like, Pinot from Oregon. They're always going to tell you about the style. We're getting to a point right now where in the beer business, it always was the brand. What kind of beer do you drink? And they would tell you a brand. Well, now they're saying, I like IPAs or I like pale ales. So we have to be sensitive to that because every brewer that I've ever met wants to build equity in their brewery and in their main brand, not in the styles. And so we as a wholesaler have to understand that and have to make sure that when we go to market that we're trying to basically be consistent with what the supplier wants. And that's a little tricky. It is interesting to see in many cases where because of that issue with the rotator and the fact that there's so much real estate dedicated to craft beer, we as distributors are not as instrumental as the consumer is because they're getting a chance to see all these brands. They're all out there. Thanks to about, in the city of Portland, 50 bottle shops. We all know what specialty grocery does in regards to variety. We all know what the major grocery stores are doing and on premise. So it's more about making sure that we track which particular brands have performed well when they've been on the stage. So it's less the distributor, and it's really less push and really more pull. And if we analyze that information, both supplier and wholesaler will come to the realization that this particular brand has got some legs. And their pubs that they have are in addition to all those other retail outlets to give them validation on what's working. That's why we love to do business with suppliers that have pubs because it's a test market that they can actually see real life every day. It's only one location or two, or in case of Brett, it's a number of locations, but nevertheless it's a sampling ground. And coupled with then what the bottle shops are doing, what on-premise is doing, we just have to analyze what the consumer's buying and then start making decisions for there to build the portfolio.
Right. So, Mark, how do you feed the demand for style while concurrently building a brand loyalty or a demand for a brand?
Well, I think these brands are almost exclusively about culture. When you talk to all the talented brewers in this room and across the country, they all own a culture. Brett and Rogue is a great example. The Rogue culture is very clear. If you've ever been into one of their pubs, if you've ever spent any time with the Joyce family and their organization, the culture of Rogue comes through. And the beers are terrific. But many of these beers are terrific. So where's the brand affinity? And the brand affinity is built on culture, but there's a unique selling proposition that you employ when you buy a Rogue beer. That Rogue beer, that brand is distinct. And so it's important that what's in Carmen mentioned this earlier, the liquid needs to be good. And we've got the best craft beers in the world in this room and in this city. But the brand needs to be well understood. So do you own a unique space? By the way, we all know how popular local is. It's the number one bar call, right? What do you have that's local or what do you have that's new? Neither one of those propositions are unduplicatable. Anybody can be local if you can get a lease. Anybody can be new if you can launch a brewery. So they're easily duplicatable. What else are you going to do with your brewery that gives your culture and your brand a unique and distinct proposition that's easily understood by the drinker and by your selling community, in this case, the distributor? And I think those that find a way to crack that code have a leg up. With respect to style, I think Rob makes a good point. We don't want the beer business to become the wine business, but I think that culture creates a house feel. So when you buy a Rogue beer or you buy a Deschutes beer, you buy a Widmer beer, what the house style is, what the culture of that brewery is, and that's usually conveyed throughout their entire portfolio. And those breweries that seem to do that well seem to be able to transition from a lead style to maybe a seasonal or secondary style particularly well, because there's consistency about the culture, there's consistency about the brand attribute, and the customer becomes reliant on that brand for those reasons and those attributes.
And we wanted to touch on, too, another topic here. AB wholly owns 2 wholesalers in the state. What are some of the intricacies of the, I guess, wholesaler landscape with them here wholly owning 2 distributors? We saw earlier this year Ninkasi had a little shakeup where they switched from their distributor from Western once it was bought by AB. AB seems interested in investing up here with Elysian, 10 Barrel, the pair of wholesalers. What do you guys make of these investments as wholesalers up here, and I guess as a brewer?
Rob, you can.
You want me to take that?
Well, it's interesting too because Maletis sells Bud brand. So what, like,
Yeah.
and you guys sell 10 Barrel. The thinking has been anyway that part of the strategy on AB's part is to buy brands in places where they have these wholesalers where they can plug them in. You guys sell AB products, but you're an independent wholesaler, so I guess it's pertinent to you guys when they come in and make these types of investments. So what do you make of that?
Well, I think the good thing is they have in the past, and I would imagine they will in the future, select and maybe partner, buy, whether it be in its entirety or partial, brewers that are pretty well respected. I think we could all say that Goose Island, Elysian, 10 Barrel, Blue Point were all very respectable brewers, and in that particular case, there's a lot of suppliers that we have. When they make acquisitions, and it's a good acquisition, it's usually good for the wholesaler, whether it be 10th and Blake making an acquisition of a brewer, or Anheuser-Busch, or Crown, or anybody else. So that's the good thing. I think the other thing that everyone is usually cautious, and that is how far will that particular brand travel? And I think everyone realizes that some of the brands don't travel maybe cross-country. They do a great job in that particular geographical area. So if they kind of keep that in check, then I think the idea of any supplier, whether it be Anheuser-Busch or anyone else, buying into a craft brewer is a positive thing. As far as the distribution ownership, they do that in a number of markets. They have for over 25 years, so it's nothing new, but it is new to the Northwest in the last few years.
Right.
So
where do you sort of fit into that paradigm as an AB wholesaler, an independent AB wholesaler that carries a brand like 10 Barrel?
Well, we obviously are selling it within our portfolio, and in some cases, we actually had that brand. And in many cases, that's not always the case. They can acquire a brand, and then there's a process, obviously, that does take some time, if in fact, at all, if it ends up getting, transitioned over to their distributorship.
Is that something that you guys had been approached about at all?
We're always approached on that. Yeah, the idea is that I think it's safe to say, regardless of what supplier you're dealing with, they would like to have their brands under their supplier network. Although sometimes that's easier said than done. And frankly, it's probably because we spend a lot of time and energy building your brands, and it's not something that we want to just give up overnight, because we feel that we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears along with yourself to build those brands, and we're partial to them. So, but that's my take on it. You've got some situations where it applies to Miller Coors and some of the 10th and Blake acquisitions.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 parts for this room, which is full of the brewery community. I think there's sort of 2 ways to think of it. Michael mentioned that Common's goal was to remain local and small, and he's done an unbelievable job and built out just a spectacular space. For those breweries who have ambitions to go regionally, I think you have to be thoughtful about the network that you're building, because there's labor associated with building out the sales network. You have to have a face. You have to be able to engage. You want common systems. You want similarities with the distributors culturally and in their portfolio. And I think there's a benefit to that as you think about different strategies wherever your brewery happens to be in that continuum. I think this is an interesting deal, but as Rob pointed out, it's not new. Anheuser-Busch is in Seattle, owns the distributor in Seattle, has owned downstate Oregon, western downstate for several years, owns most of the LA market, and it appears they have an appetite to continue to grow their distribution. We like our model. We think our business is a local and regional business. We think it provides us a lot of agility and the ability to make decisions with the support of our core suppliers. We think affords us unique agility in a market that rewards the nimble nature of craft beer.
So I guess I'll rein it back in a bit, back to Portland and Oregon. I found it kind of, I guess, surprising when you guys both kind of agreed that there's not many challenges, just because from the people I talk to in maybe less established markets, you know, they'll be the first to tell you, oh, it's getting crowded here, it's getting tough out here. So I guess if there's no challenges, where's the room to grow? Where are you seeing all this run room?
Well, I think the question was, is there a challenge selling craft beer? And I think we would all agree there's no challenge selling craft beer.
Right.
Little c. But because the appetite is enormous for craft beer. I think that the challenge is building momentum and building aggregate mass and building a brand and building scale that was mentioned earlier that's important for emerging craft brands. That's challenging. Nowhere else do we hear restaurateurs or on-premise accounts, you know, they've had the same hamburger, the same club sandwich, the same Caesar salad on their menu for 20 years. If you blow through a keg in 3 days, they say, great, give me something else. Wait a second. You just blew through the keg. It was spectacular. You haven't changed your menu in 10 years, but you want to change your beers every 2 or 3 days. There's some inconsistency there. So I think we have to be better at communicating the advantage of some consistency. Variety is great. Choice is great. It's what we all want to offer. I think Portland does a better job than anybody at offering it. But I think there's also some reasonable and rational thought that needs to be applied because what we want is, and what the customers want, our customers, a retailer, they want to provide a place, an environment, a menu, and beer choices that provide the nice balance between reliability, consistency, excellence, and a little whimsy. And certainly Portland has been great at that, but that part is certainly a challenge.
So does consistency not, is consistency not inherently threatened by an increased craft share if it's constant rotation at the taps?
Well, if you talk about the taps, it's
or
interesting.
On the shelves, anything.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit different discussion. If you talk about the on-premise, the number of tap handles has grown dramatically, at a much faster rate than has the volume in the on-premise. So you have more choice and less volume per point of distribution, which presents problems for everybody. But this is what we do. By the way, the paradigm for distributors is the more choice we provide, the more value we add to the supply chain. It also creates incredible complexity for us to provide this choice. So on the one hand, we love it. On the other hand, there are some head-scratching moments where we say, wait a second, why are you making a change when this was wildly successful? And ultimately, the customer is always right. Ultimately, we want to provide a variety of choice. But it's a unique paradox that we face. It's not unique to beer. It's happening throughout all CPG, but it's especially acute in beer because what we manage needs to be fresh, needs to be rotated. It's heavy, comes in glass and big heavy kegs. It's difficult to manage, and so it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Right. Brett, we haven't heard from you in a while, so I just
I love watching the show. This is great.
so I don't have the exact numbers offhand, but the local craft share alone out here is like 20% or something, and then on the drafts it's 50 or 60%, something ridiculously high like that. So where are you seeing run room for brewers out there to sort of seize onto something and maybe take advantage of something that's maybe a tad underdeveloped?
Yeah, I mean, I think the on-premise is really, as was mentioned earlier, is quite different from the off-premise. I think first thing you have to do in on-premise as a brewer, is, as much as you'd like to again wish for the the good old days where we got a tap handle and it's stuck forever, like those days are gone, right? So you have to first mentally embrace it. So we embrace rotationation, because to fight it is foolish. You're just gonna lose. So I still think there's still growth, but to get that next tap handle, you have to do one of a couple things. One is, I think feet on the street is a reality that you face if you really want to get significant distribution on premise. And the second thing you can do, if you have that, even if you don't have that, is build a great plan. And I think that's something that we've learned in the last number of years is becoming more and more important every single year. You better have a really good, clear plan that you built together with your distributor. So you don't want to be the guy that comes at it every month like, hey, why don't we have more tap handles? It can't be based on something arbitrary like that. It's got to be, hey, we did annual planning. We had a plan that looked like this. We said we do this. You agreed to do that. Let's look at the results together. So it's really got to be that planning-based partnership if you really think you're going to get incremental draft handles through your distributor. And then you also have, I think, an obligation, if you want to put the manpower and the cost out there, to put a street person out there to go get some handles and teach the distributors how to sell Rogue, how to do it in a way that you see as appropriate for your brand.
Right. Sorry, Rob?
Well, Dave, you were, I think, referring to kind of growth opportunities, and I think it's important to come back and look at this particular market and other urban markets, especially on the West Coast. You've got a brand like Widmer, it sells more than Corona. Deschutes sells more than Corona. You can go through the entire South, and there's people that are probably listening in, hopefully all over the country, if it's not getting too late for them on the East Coast. And that is a snippet where people go, wait a minute, how could that be? How could two craft brewers in a particular market outsell Corona? If you went to LA and told them that, or Texas or Miami, they would be flabbergasted. And I don't mean to correct you, but I've got to, because facts, numbers are critical. IRI, which is a very good indicator of what's going on, it is over 50 share, dollar share. And that's basically, you can't take cases to the bank, you take dollars to the bank. So that's important for everyone to know. And if people realize that, they can realize, and I've talked to the BA a little bit about it when they get back and forth about legislative issues. I go, don't look too far. Just go to the markets that basically have a very high share of craft and see exactly how it was done. Let the craft brewer have a brew pub. Let them self-distribute. Let them do everything that they did in Oregon. Because if you want a 55, 60 share, just look at someone that's basically been doing it. Don't try to basically, rebuild the model here. It's really already been built. Take a look at it, tweak it the way you see fit. I think there's even some distributors that have their head in the ground and aren't necessarily looking at it, in the fashion that they should to basically grow the craft category. So I think it's pretty significant here, and I think that's what we're saying here. But I also want to say that we as distributors, and I think I can share this with Mark is in this camp too. We don't rest on our laurels. We're not sitting here, giving each other high fives that the category is just going up double digit year after year. We're trying to look forward and seeing where are the sharp corners ahead. The craft brewers know that too. What they're doing with session beers is a perfect example. Right now, the IPAs, the fourth quarter is when the craft index is the highest. It doesn't necessarily index the highest in spring and summer. But I think soon you will probably find, because of all the session beers that are coming out by so many craft brewers, many of them here and hopefully listening in, they have addressed that. And they're going to fill that void. They're going to have the whole gamut. And that's not to even mention whether or not it's in a 16-ounce can, a 12-ounce can. half packs or whatever. There's a whole bit of, a whole opportunity for package proliferation in addition.
I think we're maybe up against it time-wise, but I did want to ask you guys too, how has your portfolio building strategy changed in recent years as the category has matured? Have you had to think differently about the brands that you take on? And if so, like what do you now, how has it changed? What are you looking for? What are the new considerations that you need to sort of check off before you are going to take on a new supplier partner? I guess we'll start with Mark.
Yeah, well, I think I touched on some of this earlier. We want people to have a plan, and so great people with the right resources. So that means obviously great brewers, but they know what the brand stands for. They're consistent about it. They have the resources to build their business. They can demonstrate that they have a vision. They have the leadership skills to build their business as well. These are all sort of fundamental tenets of any business, and not just the beer business. So we look at that first. Are they going to be successful whether they're with us or without us, right? Another distribution house. That's the first thing. Then we look at how well will they fit within our portfolio, how well will they fit within our culture, and how well will the market respond to the brand proposition. And if we answer all those affirmatively, we look at all this, we say, wow, this is a terrific fit. We have tremendous confidence in our team. And we try to be very deliberate about the propositions that we make, because I mean these are your families, these are your lives. This isn't about business for you. It's about the passion and the heart and the love you have for that you heard Michael talk about earlier. This is really important stuff, and these are the kinds of success stories and relationships we want to have. And so when this all comes together and we know we can succeed, then we build a plan to win together. Has it become more complicated? There have become more choices. We see more brands and more breweries coming at us for sure, not only in Oregon but out of state. And so by that measure, I think we just have to be, and we become more disciplined about our process. We rely on our team. We have great insights into the market. We trust our team. But we follow the process so that we make good measured decisions.
Awesome. I'm going to give the last word to Brett here, and I'll just ask if you have any advice for early stage entrepreneurs who are looking to maybe grow in this market.
Yeah, I would just say one simple thing, and I see Fernari giving us the cut sign back here. I would say this: build your brand before you build your business, because if you have to. You can get some sales just by doing a few things right, but if you're in this for the midterm and certainly for the long term, you better understand what your brand is all about, and that sometimes is the hardest work to do, but I think the most critical and rewarding long-term work.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We got a round
Dave.
of applause for you guys.
Yeah,